Alrighty, on to the white blood cells, your leukocytes and such. So their main purpose is for your protection. They're a very small percentage of your overall blood volume. And when they're traveling through the circulatory system, when they go through a capillary bed on the backside, on the venous side, the venular side, because the basement membrane is thin or missing in that area, they have this ability to go between and leave the circulatory and get into the interstitial space. The ability to do that is known as diapedesis. They move like an amoeba would move. Study your early biology, you'll understand that. They are attracted to chemical concentrations. Mast cells and such will release certain chemicals, histamine being one of them, and that attracts these white blood cells. And so they will move into the general direction of or accumulate in that area where there is this messenger being released. That's chemotaxis. So once they are there, they will stimulate the production of other needed white blood cells. That's leukopoiesis. And so that's how you will have an increase in certain types of white blood cells. And if you were to do a differential white blood cell count, figure out what's there, then you can kind of get an idea of what type of infection you have. There's two big types or groups of white blood cells. Those that have these membrane-bound granules. You can see the neutrophils, the eosinophils, and basophils are of those. And then the ones that don't. They have no membrane-bound granules and such. That'd be the lymphocytes and the monocytes. When you look at your granulocytes, we see this because of the type of staining that we do. It's known as a Wright stain. You can look up on the internet and find pictures of Wright stains and all. The nucleus is not just a round nucleus. It has little bitty lobes sticking out of them, so we call these a bilobar nuclei on these granulocytes. All three of them have this, and they are all phagocytic cells, which means they eat other things. Phagocytosis is the eating of large things or food. All right, neutrophils. They go after bacteria and fungi. So when you have a bacterial infection, you'll have an increase in neutrophils. When you have a fungal infection, you'll have an increase in neutrophils. They're the most numerous. I think about 60 to 70% of all your white blood cells should be neutrophils. They contain both basophilic blue and acidophilic red granules. So they have a purplish look to them under the microscope. They contain proteins, these defensin proteins and such. It's like an antibiotic type protein. They poke holes in bacterial cell walls and they poke holes in fungal cell walls. That's how they destroy the invaders and such. They poke the holes that causes the cell wall of either the bacteria or the fungus to be weak, and then it splits, and that's your lysis and all. So if you had a high count of neutrophils than the normal count, you probably have a bacterial or a fungal infection. Basophils, these are very rare. They're there, but you don't see that many of them. They contain within their granules histamine, so it gives them a dark blue color right there. They are similar to the mast cells that you learned about when you learned skin and connective tissue and such. So they will release the histamine, and then they also release an immunoglobulin E. That's there as well, and that triggers this inflammation and vasodilation and such, allergic reaction, if you will. So an antihistamine, if you were to take that, like Benadryl, it does the opposite. It blocks this stuff. Histamine is very important. We tend to give it a bad rap by taking antihistamines, but it has a role to play. Eosinophils, this is another one, and these are reddish because they contain these acidic granules and such. These acidic granules are digestive enzymes and they help break down parasites, parasitic worm larvae that the body would encounter while it's in the blood. So parasite worm eggs are everywhere. They are everywhere. And when you ingest them, they get into your digestive system, they hatch, they burrow through the mucosa, they get into the bloodstream, and they travel from the blood through the bloodstream. They're looking for the lungs. They're going to get to your lungs and such, but they can end up in other places you don't want. The brain, the muscles, the liver, such. And these eosinophils, they go after that. Now, they also release chemicals that counteract the allergic reaction. So when the basophils are releasing the histamine, the eosinophils keep them in check. So you got to train them. Now you get into the ones that don't have the granules, and these would be your lymphocytes. The lymphocytes, there's two big types, T cells and B cells, and we named them based upon where they are matured. Everything is produced in the bone marrow, but these will then travel from the bone marrow through the blood to either the thymus gland, which is located in your mediastinum, kind of above your heart, or they stay in the bone. And while they're there, they are acted upon by local hormones. In the thymus, it's the hormone is thymosin and such, and it causes them to differentiate into an adult T cell or an adult B cell. So these, both of them, will then leave those glands and travel to areas in the lymphatic system. They go to lymph nodes, lymph nodules and such, and they hang out. They're in your blood as well, and they're waiting for invaders. So they have different sizes. If you were to pull it from the blood, it has one size. You pull it from the lymph, and it'll have a different size. One of these agranulocytes is your monocytes. These are very large cells and such. They have like a kidney-shaped dark nucleus and a clear cytoplasm. And these guys are eaters. They eat things. That's their job. They wander around and they eat things. How do you produce one? What's the pathway of this? And they have different, all of your white blood cells have different pathways and different originating cells. They both will start with a hemocytoblast. But then, depending upon the factor, the hormone present and such, what pathway do you take? And so when you look at an eosinophil, a basophil, a neutrophil, it has a certain pathway. And then these guys, their lifespan is very short. When you look at a monocyte and a lymphocyte, they have a different pathway. And their lifespan is rather long, So, because this is where we will build our memory through the B cells and such, and to where when we are exposed to a pathogen, a virus or something, once again, we have a immunological memory to help fight those off. So some of these are very, very powerful, and you don't want them hanging around. And so they have a very short lifespan. Other ones, they're necessary for our continued immunity to help us stay healthy and alive. How do you get, how are certain ones, why do you get more neutrophils over eosinophils and such? And that's through these colony stimulating factors. And so when a macrophage or when a lymphocyte shows up and they see a certain invader, they then release these CSFs, and then that goes to the bone marrow, and then boom, that then gets the correct type of white blood cell produced. So you see one of these is a cytokine known as interleukin 3, and that's just get a general increase in your lymphocyte production. When we get into immunity, you'll see more of that. You can have problems with your white blood cells. You can have too many or not enough. Usually a low count leukopenia is due to a viral infection like HIV, glucocorticoids, which is produced by the cortex of the adrenal gland, which is cortisol, which is released in response to stress. Stress, cortisol, infection. So you could also be undergoing chemotherapy. In that case, you're destroying your bone marrow, the chemicals and such there to slow down mitosis, to slow down cancer. You can have a cancer of the white blood cells, that's leukemia. And there's different forms of them right there. There's examples and kind of symptoms. Don't ever put your symptoms into the internet, because you will come up with leukemia. So stay away from the internet on that one. Mononucleosis, this is caused by a virus. It's just basically excessive monocytes and lymphocytes. They'll kind of accumulate in the spleen. The spleen's trying to get rid of them and such. Your spleen will swell, be sore, it can rupture, and death can occur. It's not something to play around with. The timeline of recovery is different for every individual and such, but a little bit more than 3 weeks. Your thrombocytes, your platelets. These will start off as a cell and then they will rupture. And so you'll see just little bitty purple specks is what you notice and such. Now, there's a lot of them. They're little bitty specks, and their purpose is for repairing damaged vasculature and such. They are under the hormone thrombopoietin, and then you get thrombopoiesis, and you get these platelets produced and such. They will start off with a stem cell and such, and then it'll become a megakaryoblast, and it'll become an early megakaryocyte. Remember, blast becomes a site, and then a megakaryocyte is a multi-lobed large cell which then ruptures and such. And when it ruptures, it's the non-nuclear parts of that cell that travel in the plasma, and that is what your platelets are. The liquid portion of your blood, the plasma, like I said, it makes up about a little bit over half of your blood volume. And in the plasma, it's mostly water. There's other things in there dissolved in the water, the proteins, your antibodies and your globulins, immunoglobulins and such. Your clotting proteins, which are different from your platelets. These are the clotting proteins, and they are in an inactive form. So you see the prefix pro or the suffix ogen. You see those right there. Other proteins are found in there. Your certain nutrients are found in there, and your electrolytes are found in the plasma. All right.